and made of silk and steel. Chapter 8.
Natasha was laughing. Everyone else with any good sense of hiding was hiding far, far away right now, because terrible things happened whenever Natasha laughed that way. Luckily, Tony had no good sense. He has been dryly assured his whole life that all Starks were absent of the normal impulses which contained any and all self-preservation. What's good, Red Scare? Oh ho, what the country fried fuck is that? Someone's shaky camera phone had taken video in Hell's Kitchen of a woman who had something of a great deal more significant than road rage going on. The chick managed to kick a man which they both recognized as a fairly well-known but nearly untouchable drug dealer living uptown. She kicked his fancy SUV halfway down the block. Do you remember that cute little Iron Baby we saw on Twitter, who had the Justice League with him? Yes. Tony pouted theatrically. Pep insisted that we're not allowed to adopt him. Well, it seems that the boy went missing for a while, and his parents were trying to find him. That, Natasha told him with a tiger's smile, is your dear Iron Baby's mother. Catwoman? Tony said, aghast, in the way that some actors might deliver the line "Et tu brute?" on stage. The mewling Rampalian wretch herself, Natasha quoted with evident relish. That woman gave birth to your sweet little prodigy. They watched her then pick said drug dealer up by the collar and give him a good hard shake. It wasn't raining, so they were fairly confident that the man had just pissed himself. The fury on the woman's face should have rightfully turned him to stone. Holy shit, Catwoman, Tony blurted out, his eyes enormous. Please step on my neck. Batman might object, Pepper observed mildly, watching over his shoulder and causing him to jump about a foot in the air at the sound of her voice. Natasha merely continued her cackling. What are we going to do? The boy said, glancing up at him. Frank supposed that was a pretty fair question, even if he was in no mood to answer it. He had taken them nearly 2 hours to walk into town and locate a used car dealership, and almost that long again to convince the weedy little salesman to actually get him a usable vehicle. A foreboding stare and paying in cash had finally accomplished what politeness couldn't. They were walking back the way they'd come, the car parked cautiously back on the road. Congratulations, kid, you're getting your wish. We're going to New York so that I can hand you back to your parents. Rather than being happy about this fact, Peter now looked alarmed. Why? He looked around to the wreckage of the car and the bloodied man they'd left beside it. About a quarter mile or so in front of them, looking up at Frank's scowl, he swallowed and asked, I mean, that guy seems pretty dangerous, Mr. Castle. I wanted to stay away from Mom and Dad because Salinger was mean, but this seems way worse. Frank shook his head. Sorry, kid. This shit has gone way above my pay grade. That asshole was some kind of enhanced fighter. Then he seemed to realize that he'd cursed in front of Peter twice and looked uncomfortable. It's okay, Peter reassured him. Mom uses words like those all the time. She says it's okay for me to use them too. If an adult is being mean to me, I just can't say them to another kid. Frank's brow rose. Is that so? Peter nodded seriously, apparently unable to sense his amusement. She said calling another kid an asshole would make me look like a jerk, even if they were the one bullying me. But any adult who tries to be a dick to me is fair game. He snorted. I think your mom and I would get along, kid. He tapped Peter on the shoulder, indicating that he should stop. Stay here. Look, kid, Frank said quietly, setting his aching body on a nearby stone at about thigh height. He sensed this was a necessary conversation. That guy who tried to take you, that was a professional, Peter. He wasn't just a random lunatic who came out of nowhere. out of the middle of nowhere, Montana, and attacked the first car he saw. Somebody sent him, specifically to fetch you for them. Peter nodded at this statement, apparently having already guessed this. God, the kid was too smart. Your father has some experience dealing with people like this, Frank finally said. People who would kidnap a child. With professionals like this, and frankly, kid, if there are professionals who decided to find you, running around with you all around the country by myself ain't gonna do jack shit to stop him. A funny look came over Peter's face, and Frank girded himself before he asked, Mr. Castle, is my dad a mob lawyer? Frank had to cough violently for a moment to keep himself from bursting out into hysterical laughter, too smart by half. No, Pete. The opposite. Your dad has a lot of experience sending people like this to prison and making sure that they stay there. Oh, Peter said, relaxing slightly. So you think he's going to know what to do? I think we haven't got any other choice, Frank informed him grimly. Whoever or whatever sent that guy must have some pretty high-tech surveillance on you. Even hours after leaving the major cities, normally I would have assumed that he was trying to go after me, but... He waved a hand at the wreckage ahead, and Peter nodded. The stranger had pretty clearly been trying to grab Peter and hadn't bothered with the adult in the front seat. So you think it's a better idea to go back to my mom and dad? You miss them, and your dad has dealt with this shit before. Come to think of it, your mom probably has too. They were worried about Salinger because he would hurt you to hurt them, but this ain't like that. Especially since this is looking more and more like a government job. But Frank wasn't going to say shit like that out loud. The kid had enough scares today already, and he wasn't necessarily sure that it was the United States government that wanted Peter so badly. The existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. had made the world a much smaller place. Sometimes for good, sometimes for ill. He was willing to bet he knew the reason that they'd made their move to snatch him now, though, because Frank, for however dangerous he was still an ordinary man. Assuming they did not know that Peter's father was really Daredevil, they still had to know that his mother was Jessica Jones, who was undeniably even more dangerous than Daredevil in a way. Jessica uncovered secrets for a living and had the physical strength that may have been able to match RoboCop back there, and the proven history of making the kill when she had to. It seemed all too convenient to Frank that the moment the boy had been taken out of the city and away from his mother, an enhanced man with a metal arm had suddenly appeared to rip him out of a vehicle he'd crashed. If they did know that Daredevil was really Matt Murdock, that made it even more true. Away from his furious and monstrously strong mother, away from his cunning and doggedly determined father, Peter was a much easier target to capture, and that was never mind the colorful cast of characters who referred to themselves as the Peter Parker Protection Squad. He'd stashed his sniper rifle in its kit in the nearby bushes, close enough to make a reliable shot if the assassin, kidnapper, utterly unhinged lunatic was still there. Frank was under no illusions. This was a professional called to do a professional job, and he was not about to go the Daredevil route and give this guy a second chance. Peter stared at him as he opened the case, and though Frank felt the brief burn in his conscience for breaking his promise to Karen, in his heart he knew this was absolutely worth it. Human serial killer weirdos was one thing. Government-hired kidnappers was another. Or he felt guilty until Peter patiently informed him, "He isn't there anymore, Mr. Castle." Looking up from his assembly, Frank turned slightly toward him. "How the hell do you know that, kid?" "The burning is gone," Peter said simply, as though that were an explanation in of itself. "The burning?" Frank repeated numbly. "Whenever I'm near something dangerous, a person or situation, there's like a prickling. Peter said anxiously. At the back of my neck. The more dangerous it is, the more it burns. Frank simply stared at him, feeling for the first time in his long, hard life, a swell of real and deep pity for this child, and for his parents too, in a way, strong enough to break a cyborg's ribs, clever as the devil, with some kind of future dream prediction or spirit travel nonsense ability, and a living panic radar to boot. All that, and he was 7, just 7 years old. I see. In their youth and ignorance of themselves and each other, Matt and Jessica had unintentionally created a Frankenstein's monster of their own powers through their union, and luck or nature had supercharged them to an unimaginable degree, and now they all lived inside of this little boy like a bomb that was waiting for its timer to set. And with that swell of pity and a sickening disgust of his familiar knowledge that was the wretchedness of mankind in his gut, Frank Castle knew exactly why a cyborg hitman had tried to take Peter Parker, even if he didn't yet know who had asked for him, because that little boy at only 7 years old may already be the most powerful superhuman in the world. He certainly had the potential to be, if he wasn't. But Frank and whoever wanted him knew that Peter was not made into what he was. He was not a creature of deliberate science and research that people like that would understand and accept and create for their own uses. He was born this way, like a cruel universe's accidental gift. Step 1, get a new car. Step 2, kill idiot with metal arm. No. Step 2, get Max to a vet. Step 3, run. Oh shit, Frank said aloud, grabbing Peter's sweater and pulling him closer before they could go all the way into the ditch. Because the idiot with the metal arm was not gone. The idiot with the metal arm was in the ditch of the wreckage, petting his injured freaking dog. The injured freaking dog that he had injured. Just sitting there, petting his dog, with a blank look on his face. Mr. Castle? Peter said. He can see us. Yup. He isn't moving. Nope. He doesn't feel dangerous anymore. Peter said, hopeful. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying his hardest to reach out with that other sense, grasping for even the slightest hint of a threat. But again, the area came back clean. Opening his eyes, he saw the man again, a large figure with a blank expression, with pale, strangely despondent eyes, in a face smeared with black grease paint. He moved forward and was stopped short by Mr. Castle's grip on his arm, relentless and paranoid. "Nuh-uh, kid." "But he isn't dangerous," Peter protested. "I think you broke him." "Or it's a trap," Mr. Castle said, sounding increasingly frustrated with him. Peter shook his head. How could he explain? That wouldn't work on me. "It worked before, Peter," he growled. "He shot out the goddamn tires, and you didn't know that." "Because neither of us were going to be really hurt," Peter said slowly, working backwards from the problem. "The world kept moving at full speed when the car crashed because we were never in any danger of being seriously hurt. I only realized we were in trouble when he walked toward the car." "What the hell does that mean?" Mr. Castle demanded. "The world kept moving at full speed? What other speed is there?" Peter looked up at him. "Seriously," he said. "Slow motion. If I'm near an event that involves major injuries, then for me the world slows down, just for a few seconds." Mr. Castle's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked genuinely uneasy. "You can slow time?" Quickly, Peter shook his head. No, definitely not," he said, waving his hands. "It's like something to do with my senses again, I think. How fast my eyes can capture movement. My head hurts really badly afterwards for a few hours, but I'm not changing anything in the space-time matrix or anything like that. Sure, Mr. Castle huffed, but I'm still gonna shoot him. No, Peter yelped. You can't do that. Mr. Castle looks like he's trying not to roll his eyes outright. It's fucking incredible how, despite being strangers to each other for most of the first years of his life, Peter is somehow still exactly like Matt Murdock. And, well, Frank had made a promise, didn't he? And even if he wasn't as inclined to keep that promise as he really was, he couldn't very well shoot the man with Peter standing right in front of him and pleading for his life. Mr. Castle, he asked hesitantly, still staring at the semi-robotic stranger mechanically petting Max, who was in pretty good spirits for an animal with a broken leg. It probably helped that he wasn't actively trying to walk on it. Does it seem like he's a bit... Yeah, a bit was right. Like someone had cracked open the panel of a hard drive and started randomly ripping bits out of wiring and components pieces willy-nilly. What the hell am I supposed to do with you? Frank demanded irritably of the would-be kidnapper. He got nothing but a blank stare in return. Maybe he knows something, Peter suggested helpfully, about whoever wants me. And we're gonna, what, take a robo-assassin out on a cross-country tour with us? He asked sourly. That's beyond reckless, kid. So naturally, that is precisely what they do. In Frank's defense, there were no good choices available. Either shoot the man with Peter's full knowledge that he'd committed murder against a man who seemed completely incapable or unwilling to raise a hand to defend himself, or leave the one person who could tell them the identity of the people who'd ordered Peter to be taken sitting on the side of a Montana highway. Or they could take him with them. No, Peter said it gently, like Mom would when she was giving Tessa directions. However, this was quickly followed by having to physically intervene as a hand tried to pull the bandages away from his head. Squeezing at his fingers, Peter firmly pulled his hand back down and repeated, "No, Edward." Edward, Mr. Castle repeated, bewildered, looking at the mirror and into the back seat. Max was asleep in the passenger seat, beside him, heavily medicated and wearing a cast as well as his cone of shame. Peter shrugged. Like Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist? He has a metal arm, he explained, then quickly grabbed Edward's hand again as he started picking at the no doubt itchy band-aid stuck to his bruised face. No, I said, you have to let them heal. I don't even know if he understands English, Pete. No, he understands when I say things, the boy said, with a narrow-eyed look at the man beside him. The man gives him a long blank stare in return. No indication that he knows that he is the topic of further conversation. Peter's insistence that Edward could be useful is looking like a slimmer and slimmer possibility. It's like the part that knows how to answer me is missing. Mr. Castle snorted. Yeah, he's got a lot of parts missing. There, Jessica asked, waiting impatiently for Matt to give an answer. Behind them, Trish was trying to make reassuring noises as the couple who'd just had their little homemade gazebo torn from their backyard. Cocking his head, Matt pointed to a spot in the freshly revealed earth below their feet, where he sensed that there was a larger irregular shape buried in the dirt, about the right size for a human body. There. With one motion, Jess lifted her foot, and when she brought it down, the ground parted for her, a more gruesome and tragic Moses parting the Red Sea. And there, waiting inside that bag for nearly 20 years in his own parents' backyard, was Gregory Salinger's very first victim. End of chapter.